Good evening, folks. So, what we are looking at today is the evaluation of Article 8, which is your right to a private life, right to a family life, right to home and correspondence. Now, there are plenty of discussion points. So, for OCR, remember you need a point, it has to be developed, and then you need that extra bit. So, PDE, be thinking each kind of point you make should be worth 3 marks. And for a 20-mark essay question, you need to get 12 for AO3. Other examples may be slightly different. But the points, you can use whether you're doing OCR, AQA, or any of the other exam boards. Okay, so first of all, I would make the point that Article 8 is a qualified right. So this means you do have rights, but they can be limited. Parliament only has to change the law. If you are successful in your case, Parliament only has to change the law in as far as it is possible to do so, which again is quite a vague term, and it means that the decisions of the European Court aren't actually binding. The decision that's made in your case doesn't affect you. We can't go back and not invade your private life, but it could change the law for people in the future. The other issue that, as a general point, I would talk about is the fact that Parliament can derogate in an emergency. So the UK does not have to respect your rights if it is an emergency. Who decides if it's an emergency? Well, it's the UK government. So that possibly is open to abuse. Another general point is the fact that you have to exhaust the UK court process before you can get up to the European Court of Human Rights. So this obviously takes time, it takes money. You need to be aware that you have rights. You need to be aware that your rights are breached. How do you know that you can bring a case or seek judicial review? You don't. Also, remember, you are bringing a case against a public body or the UK government, and they are going to have very well qualified lawyers. So there may well be inequality of arms, just like there was in Steele versus Morris. And when your decision is made, it's being made by an unelected judge, which we have issues with democracy. And they may not even be from the UK. In fact, they're probably not from the UK, yet they're making decisions that impact UK law. So those are just two kind of generic points. Now, specific to Article 8, I would be saying that it is a wide-ranging article, which means it's actually quite difficult to define. What is meant by family life? That's a very wide term. It's not clear. There's no set list for family relationships. What is meant by, you have a right to sex life? Well, in the case of Brown, they didn't. It was deemed to be no breach of Article 8. They argued they had the right to a private life, to do what they wanted sexually in private, and the court disagreed. So it is difficult to define a lot of these terms in Article 8. There's also the issue of Article 8 versus Article 10. So Article 8, you have the right to a private life, but often the press want to publish articles that maybe go against this. However, they are claiming Article 10, and the courts have openly said we're not going to favour one article over another. So it comes down to a case-by-case basis. It's difficult to find a solution to this, which does mean that there is inconsistency. And you have to think, well, celebrities do have a private life. Should they have less of a private life than you and me? Think of the Meghan Markle case, where she brought successfully a case against the Daily Mail and won when they published a letter that she had written to her father. Press freedom in a democracy is very, very important, but there's still a balance to be struck. I would mention that the law protects children, which I think is really important. So Axon talked about doctors don't have to tell parents about any contraception advice, abortion advice, or anything to do with sexual health, as long as the child is GILIC competent. So they're not flat out refusing to disclose information to parents, but they are allowing the child autonomy over their body as long as they are mentally capable to understand what is happening to them, which I think is quite important in an advanced society. Von Hanover also says children have the rights, have greater rights to a private life, which again I think is important because it protects them from unnecessary scrutiny, also protects them from having information published that then follows them around for the rest of their life. Equally, we do protect children as well when we talk about the fact that yes, you have a right to a family life, but we will not allow a parent to have a child if they are a danger to that child. So we can remove your right to a family life, and rightly so. The press quite often get upset about the fact that they think Article 8 gives criminals too many rights. They think that Article 8 means that criminals can claim they should not be deported if they're from another country because they have a right to a family life. There's actually very little evidence that people remain in the country due to a family life. So Agyarko, they said, will continue the relationships outside of the country. The other issue I talk about is surveillance. So the IPA is very controversial. It's referred to as a snooper's charter. Your personal data is at risk if it's being monitored. Is it being abused? Is it being checked? Why is it being used? When is it strictly necessary? All of these questions, your data is being stored for how long? Facial recognition is being used more and more. And when it's about you and it's your image being stored, who is then being sold your image? There are a lot of issues with this. The other issue with surveillance is CCTV. We have one of the largest, we use the most CCTV in Europe. Does this increased surveillance actually reduce crime? I mean, a lot of these domestic laws and uses of surveillance are actually breaching Article 8. But again, we've got to wait for somebody to bring a case. The other thing I would say Article 8 is good. It does protect minority groups. So what we've seen changes in the law. The UK government has adapted. We've seen the Gender Recognition Act. So it is adapting to modern society. It is listening to the European Court of Human Rights, even though their decisions are not binding. They are persuasive. And now you can marry the same gender. So there are lots of different points to talk about. You could also mention about your private life at work. It's unclear how much it's reduced. We know the case of Barbulescu, quite an interesting one, has given you rights whilst you're at work, but then people are being sacked for social media posts. So have a think. There's plenty more evaluation points that you can think of. You can talk about individual cases. You can look at the domestic legislation in more detail. But hopefully that gives you some ideas. And remember, it's 12 marks PDE.